Welcome to the podcast for your
Thank you
spiritual
so
growth.
much for tuning in
Evolve,
to today's podcast.
align,
This one
and
is a very
embrace.
special one, and
I am
I'm really
Sophia.
excited to share
And
this
I'm
with
Alex.
you because me and
Let's
Alex sat
start.
down with Sophia Ndaba. She is an Australian-born dancer and model, and she really sat down with us and discussed systematic racism, white privilege, and we talked about our different experiences with racism and how we as white women can engage in a conversation like this. So there's going to be a lot of vulnerability here from each side, and I hope this inspires you to start a conversation as well. I hope you enjoy, and let's go.
Nice that everybody's here, and so nice that you are listening and you joined us. And today we are going to talk about a very specific topic that is very present in the social media, and maybe you've already came across it, and which is racism and everything about systematic racism and white privilege. And also we will add our personal vulnerability to this very topic today, with a special guest that we have here for the first time ever. It's going to be us three talking, and it's Sophia.
Hello.
A different Sophia. Hey.
Yeah, Sophia. Sophia and Sophia too.
Yes. Yes. I'm really excited. Me and Alex, we were talking about should we talk about this, right? Because it's so present, and we wanna like also highlight that we want to learn more, but at the same time we are both white. So we were like, how can we talk about it if we don't really experience it? So that's why we brought in Sophia, number two, to help us kind of clarify things and understand maybe things better, and just be able to have a conversation, because I feel like everybody's saying that's the number one thing you should do. You should have a conversation. But often when we have a conversation just between white folks, we get stuck because we just have one side of the conversation. And so thank you for agreeing to jumping on with us and talking about this.
Yeah, no problem. I feel like it's a really important time, and I think what you said is right, that we should be having these conversations, and there's so much work that can be done inside these conversations, one-on-one with friends or in close circles, and then to be able to have that conversation today with you guys can show people how to have those conversations and how to be vulnerable, and also not feel so scared about these topics, because we're never going to get everything right. We cannot always be 100% politically correct, but now more than ever is just the time to still try and have these conversations and put in the work. Yeah,
Totally.
So yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. So why don't you just give the listeners an idea of who you are and what you do, just so they get to know you.
Yeah, sure. So I was born in Australia, in Sydney. My mum is a white Australian Caucasian lady, and my dad is a Zulu man from South Africa. And together they had 2 kids. My older brother, he's 6 years older than me, and me. And they actually lived in Africa for a while before I was born. And then it came time for me to be born. Then mum and my brother came to Sydney to have me, and that's where we stayed. And my dad was staying in Africa for a while. So my dad is... he's passed away now, but in his life he was an amazing fighter. He was a comrade in the military wing of the ANC, and the ANC is the African National Congress, which was the political group that liberated South Africa from white government. And the commander-in-chief of that was Nelson Mandela. So just to give you an idea, that's kind of the legacy that I came from on my father's side. And then from my mom, you know, she's this really also politically minded, beautiful woman who was always acutely aware of the political situation in Australia, and the hard situation it is with how we deal with the Indigenous situation in Australia. But knowing that she's also moved to Africa and willingly became a part of the struggle there in terms of joining my father in his efforts to liberate South Africa. So I come from a very rich history in my family, and and also my brother has had his own experiences, and I just wanted to shed light on that because it's only recently since the murder of George Floyd and the movement that has erupted out of that has made me reflect on who I am and where I come from and the importance of those stories. So yeah, that's me.
Cool. Really rich, really rich. This is really like crazy and interesting to bring all of that into your life and into who you are. And I'm really interested now that you said that you just recently like really dug deeper into who you are. What does that mean for you? Like, who are you really then? Are you discovering new faces of yourself, like new personalities or new sides through that exploration?
Yeah, I feel like it's brought up a lot of questioning. Like I've asked myself a lot of questions in this time. You know, that the suffering of Black people is so profound right now. I've really questioned, where do I sit in that? How much suffering I've had and how much suffering I have not had, based on who I am, based on the fact that I'm lighter skinned. I'm a lot lighter skinned than my brother. Looking at our experiences in parallel, how he had so much more direct racism in his experience in life versus mine. And also looking at how I've conducted myself in the world as a person of color up until now, that I've largely been very passive in my in the way that I engage with racial issues. That I've always been the obedient one, the one that listens and understands everything, but never puts my opinions onto others or never shares anything in a heated, emotional, or angry way. And I've really questioned why was I like that? Because right now I don't feel like that is that's no longer me. You know, I'm ready to be a part of the conversation. I'm ready to change from a passive person to a proactive person in regards to matters of racism. I just always think to myself now, given the family that I come from, the experiences of my father, of my mom, and of my brother, why would I be so silent? Why would I be so passive, especially at a time like this? So yeah, now I'm starting to really ask those questions.
So would you say that you were serving or even accepting the white system then?
Yeah, I think, because we talked a bit about this. So I was questioning like why or who was I being obedient for? Like on a very deep level, I feel growing up in the world, one as in me, let's just talk from a personal perspective, that I wanted to be accepted, I wanted to be embraced, and I wanted to be loved by the people out there that give opportunities or that give love or that give me a chance to move forward in the world. And then I realized that those people and those structures are all white structures. they're all white institutions. They're all white systems. Even my even my close friends are majority of them are white. And then I look at my behaviors in terms of my Black community. I'm not really gearing those efforts of obedience towards my Black community. I was really using it to get gains in a white world. And I don't say this in a negative way. I just say it is in the way that I did it, and that there are many positive experiences out of that. But the base principle of it is very confronting.
No, yeah, sure, because it makes you realize like that in the end you were always trying to fit in without realizing that that you were making that effort, but you always were like on tiptoeing around so you could fit in without realizing.
Yeah, and in doing so, denying a lot of my Blackness. So, for example, at school, I always wanted straight hair. I didn't want to ever wear my hair out, like in a full afro. That I don't think I ever did that until I turned like 18 or something. And I always wanted to, have straight teeth. And when I started ballet, I wanted to always like tuck in my behind. I didn't want it to stick out. And so, all of these things, like even my mum sometimes at home, she would call me by my African name. So I have Sophia Ndaba. Sophia is the name that was given to me by my mother, and Nomalanga is the name that was given to me by my father. And if I was to be in South Africa, people would address me as Nomalanga. But because I spent most of my time in Australia, everyone just called me Sophia. Except for some odd times, Mum would call me Nomalanga, and I'd be like, don't call me that here, you know? And so in so many ways, I realized looking back how much I was trying to deny my Blackness and fit into this white world.
But also you were socialized very in an Australian way, in a white way, because you were born and you grew up mostly in Australia, right?
Yeah.
With your white mom, and your Black dad wasn't very present. He always stayed in Africa.
Yeah, he came to Australia for a short time, but definitely like the majority of the time he wasn't there. Yeah.
And it's so interesting how your brother was mostly socialized and everything was conditioned by the circumstances in South Africa, because the first 5 years of his life he grew up there, right?
Yeah, like not entirely the first 5, but he was also born in Australia, but then they went to Africa and lived there for a few years. I don't know, like maybe 3, 4, 5, until then Mum was pregnant with me and then we came back. But yeah, you're right. He had this time in Africa. He had this influence there. His younger years really were inside that world. And then also growing up as a teenager, I noticed him really identify with hip hop culture, and so I never felt him denying his Blackness in the way that he was. It was very, it's very much a part of his life and explored in different ways, because I feel like a lot of Black people around the world have adopted hip hop as a way of identifying with their Blackness. So yeah, and I love hip hop, and I also do, but I just can't say to the same extent. Yeah.
Did you both have a conflict every now and then because of that?
That's a good question.
As children?
No, I mean, he used to tease me a lot, but I don't think he ever pushed that button. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one thing that I'm really, really interested about, because my child, he's also like, he's brown too, right? So what I'm really interested about is if your mom talked to you about this racial issue, because you said she was very aware of that situation, of course, also because of your dad was really in in this world. So how did she communicate with you about that? How did you talk about it? Or did she ever really acknowledge that you had any of these issues? Or maybe throughout this time, did something come up?
Yeah. There are certain things that she was active in her parenting, like, for example, preparing us for the police. So I think the conversations she had with my brother would have been a little bit more direct, but for me, she just said, if you ever get pulled up by a cop, if he ever sets you aside, the first thing you do is ask for his badge number, ask for his identity, and write it down or try to remember it. And so I was like, you just take that in. But I realized that's something that not all parents are telling their kids. And then, my brothers had some really horrible altercations with police based on racial profiling. And even one time him and his friends were attacked, like they were bashed unprovoked by the police. And when he was 18, but the rest of his friends were at that time underage, and they were charged and also put in a jail cell for the night. So, and this is what it's like, and this is what it's like for a young Black man growing up in Australia versus a young Black woman growing up. It's very different. I didn't have that kind of intense direct racism. But in answer to your question, there was some active things, like her telling us this about the police, trying to educate us on how to respond, basically. And then I think a lot of the other stuff is more situational. So if something did happen in our experiences, then she would respond to it and be like, okay, in the world, people are going to come at you like this, and you need to X, Y, and Z. But other things, it's like with my hair. Okay, so I have a white mum who's not really, well versed in Afro hair. And so in the beginning, she tried her best, but she also had a colleague who was African tell her one day, like, you need to bring her over to my house. I need to kind of take over and do her hair. And so she was like, okay, I've got it. Yeah, good idea. And so even though she really enjoyed doing my hair, it's something that to this day she still loves to do. She acknowledges that she's not the pro in that area, and that, I could really benefit from having my hair done by an African person and also learning that way.
Yeah.
I think she was very aware of the things that she could not teach me about my Zulu heritage. She was very aware. She wanted me to connect in ways. It wasn't always possible, but she wanted a certain connection that she knew that she wasn't able to pass over herself.
Yeah, but she tried, like she tried, and she did all she could. It sounds like she was very aware. I read one book, I don't remember who wrote it, but she was basically in the beginning talking about that she also had a white mom, and they never talked about it ever, even though she was herself an activist and very much involved in this topic, but she never talked about it with her white mom until they finally got to talk about it, and her mom realized how much she didn't know. But it seems like your mom was very, very clear on what she had to speak about, and I'm still like figuring out. And because he's he's a man, like he's a boy, not a man yet, but he's a boy, and he has darker skin. I can also imagine it being harder for him.
Right.
So I'm just like trying to figure out how I can respond. But as you say, like, I cannot teach him everything. It's just prepare him as much as I can.
And I think community plays a really, really big part in that, because we were talking about role models before.
Yeah.
So role models are just so important. Even if I didn't see myself reflected in my mum, she has a lot of Indigenous friends, a lot of friends that are of color, and we grew up in these communities. So even I said before that, you know, my friends at school, they were predominantly all white. But when it comes to my family and friend circle in this side, I had a lot of people of color. And so that gave me a certain sense of belonging, even though these people were Indigenous and I am not an Indigenous person to Australia. But there's still ways that we connect, and there are still ways to feel that sense of belonging in that community. So I think, yeah, a community for sure can help where those little gaps are.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we have to move to my husband's family then, because they're, you know, they have a lot of community there. For sure. That's really interesting. Thank you also for giving me a little bit of insight what helped you. It definitely helps me too, and I hope also like moms who are listening, who have children, like I think that's one point that you mentioned, like community, that they, even if it's like if they have white children, that they surround their children with different races, in order to make it clear that we're all from the same source and that we're all the same really, and that they start to like merge and come together. So I think that's a big thing that families can do in order to bring this gap together more, and yeah, and just see that we're all the same really. Yeah.
It's so interesting how you guys are coming from, or at least you come from that background, and Sophia now is making her own family. You also come from a very white family, right? This is where you grew up in Austria. And
You mean
now,
a big family?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
you were all mostly white people, right? Or you are mostly people?
No, so I also have two sisters who are half Thai. So yeah, so I was I really was always also around different races. So I was exposed to different worlds at a very young age. So I feel like I have kind of I always had a little bit more empathy, or I felt like more connected to other people other than white. I personally, I always wanted to be Black. From my brother and I, for some reason, we always wanted to be Black. I went in Austria into these small like African shops where they did the braids, and I sat there as white little girl by myself and let them braid my hair because I loved it so much, this culture. My brother was also really like, he loved hip hop and Black music. So we both were just kind of like, why can't we be Black? Black people are so much like, they're so beautiful and I don't know, they're so powerful. So we always had a different view on Black people, and on different cultures. And with that, there's just a question also coming up for me, because I just mentioned like I always loved culture of Black people, of Africa, and I still do. My husband, his origin is also Africa, and so I let people braid my hair before. That's one thing that I see now as, and I have been confronted with it before, like cultural appropriation. And I feel so lost with this topic, because for me, it's cultural appreciation. But I do understand that you can't just take somebody else's culture and turn it into something like normal if you don't really know its origin and its importance. But
Yeah.
how do you stand with that? Like, how do you feel if you see a white woman with braided hair or wearing African shirt? Like, what does it make you feel a certain way? Or
Yeah, I mean, there's good and bad parts to it. Like, I think when I see someone wearing an African print dress, then I'm so, um, you know, I see that in a positive way. I see that as a celebration of the culture. I see that as a, yeah, I think that's really beautiful. I think cultural appropriation, when it's not cool, it's when people who are not from that culture take it out of context and then commercialize it or use the benefits for their own gain. And so you're separated from the cultural root, and therefore you're losing the understanding of where it's come from. So, for example, um, when someone's getting their hair braided, um, it would be great if we can start to educate ourselves on the history of braiding, to the point that you understand the importance of braids in Black culture, that um, there are experiences of people who were enslaved that had to braid their hair on a Sunday because they couldn't touch their hair for the next week because they were slave working the whole week. And so there's also something that comes from a really sad and traumatic notion that gets changed and transformed into Black pride by these braids now being refined and beautiful artistic hairstyles that Black people wear with pride years later. And it's a sign of their Blackness and a sign of their pride. So then once we know that history of braids, then we can wear braids differently, and we can respect where it comes from. I think when you, like, I remember my first trip to Bali, when we were kids, in the hotel, there's ladies there braiding hair with beads, doing cornrows. And this is like to me, looking back on that's a very strange cultural appropriation of braids. Because I mean, maybe I need to research it a bit more, but I'm pretty sure braids didn't come out of Indonesian culture. And then selling that to tourists in a hotel as well. Again, this is commercializing something that has come from a different part of the world, from a different culture, and from different roots. So I think, yeah, it's just important for us to acknowledge all of that information before then we step out and go get our hair braided. And I think until Black culture is really respected in the ways that are going to satisfy Black people, it's always going to be a sensitive issue to go get your hair just done out in cornrows. Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, I feel a lot of, oh my God, Alex. When I was 17 and I did my year abroad in Canada, I went to an Afro shop in Cologne and I braided my hair, just the start of my forehead, like the forehead part. I never did that before. I always wanted to do it. And yeah, I did not educate myself at all, because I just wanted to say that not like you or like the other Sophia. I grew up with like people around who remembered or remind me to get education about this kind of stuff, about those topics. Like, it wouldn't come up in my mind at all. I don't know how you can say, but maybe you can say it as if I grew up totally in a white environment. Yeah. So, I mean, there was one Turkish girl in my class, and she was the only Turkish girl in the whole school. And so, yeah, when I only met POCs when I was coming to Berlin, I think. No, actually, when I started studying, so when I was 21. And there was one woman I talked to every now and then, and about it. Plus, I don't even think that some people would talk about it or wants to talk about. So if she started talking about her stories, I was like, oh, interesting. I wouldn't even know what to ask, because my mind didn't even go that way, because I didn't grow up thinking about those kind of things. So it was amazing that she started talking about it a bit more, but I probably said a lot of stupid things to her, like just touching her hair without thinking about it. I by now know it's really rude and stupid. And yeah, she said a lot of interesting things. She went to Philadelphia in her 11th grade for 1 year, and she's half black. Her mom is American, and her dad is, I think, a German white man. And she went there, and she got told that she's so beautiful because her hair is not as curly and because her skin is so light. So that was interesting how she got told that she's so beautiful because she's not as black. And they were all very surprised that she wouldn't straighten her hair and try to be white and just left it natural. And I was very surprised. And she also was very surprised when that happened to her.
When I went to Thailand with my sister, who her skin is is a little bit darker than mine, not that much, not as dark as Zane's, for example. And we went to Thailand, and you know, Thai, they want to be white. They have white queens. They all want to be white. And walk through Bangkok, and like Thai women tell me, "Oh my God, you're so beautiful, light skin, you're so beautiful." And it's the same thing that we talked about before. Like this, they are told what beauty should look like, and they don't see that in themselves, because they are just following a picture that got commercialized of a white woman, and that's beauty. And it's so easy to think that's all around the world.
Yes, it's really true. That's what I mean about seeing ourselves reflected out there. If we don't see ourselves reflected back at us in advertising, in commercials, in TV, at home, in our communities, then we will start to try to identify with what we do see. And if that's only white people, then what that does to the psyche makes you want to deny what you are. And this is something that we have to help young people in their awareness, and by raising Black culture and really putting Black people in positions of power, in positions of everything, then young people start to see themselves reflected in the future of what they could be. And then we start with Black empowerment, and then there's a way. But I just wanted to say quickly about the cultural appropriation stuff we were just talking about. That the part that hurts Black people is that as a culture, it's been oppressed and suppressed for so long that when something is taken from the culture and then commercialized and told that it's cool and amazing, but without having the connection back to where it came from, it's really insulting, because it's saying, look, white culture, white society, you oppressed us for so long, but now you like our braids, or but now you like the curves in our body, or but now, and then all these really superficial things, without realizing that we are the bodies that come from so much trauma and oppression, as well as all of that beauty, and that we own that beauty. So please don't take it away from us.
It's like stealing just another thing from you.
Yeah. And it's also devaluing us by seeing all that as tokenistic, because it's a trend. Braids are a trend. The classified attractive shape of a woman changes over time. It's a trend. And when you do that to the Black body, you devalue it.
What's the other name? So it's cornrows, braids, but also the one that really, where you do this to your hair. What is that again called?
You can tease it.
You mean
sorry, dreads.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That's also black and got stolen by lots of whites because it's cool, or right?
Yeah,
This is
I'm pretty sure.
Sorry, I'm so sometimes I don't know. I'm feeling very weird in this conversation because I just feel so dumb. I just feel so white and dumb, and I don't know if my questions are really dumb or even racist already.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Okay, but that's what we're here for, because we
Yes.
decided we'd come together in vulnerability, so we can just start.
Yes.
We can start. Yeah, I think I also don't know for sure, but I would say the dreads, like dreadlocks come from Rastafarian culture.
Yes.
Yeah, which is Jamaica.
Which is a black culture as well.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So we could jump to a little bit of a different topic. Since I got to know you through the dance industry here in Germany, Sophia is now not living in Australia, obviously, but in Berlin. So you can, as she already said that. No, before we recorded, you did said that. So yeah, we got to know each other here in Germany, and you did not only do ballet as a young child, but into adulthood and trained and became a professional dancer. And I really also would love to just dive into this whole topic of using your skin color, your look in that way to get jobs, because I have met you and looked at you as a very exotic and beautiful woman, and as a type of person that can just fit into every group because not only of your talent, but of your look. And I kind of know how that feels, because I also get booked because of the look, because they just need another brown haired white girl in the group to make it look fun and nice for a show. How was it for you to enter the dance world, where your body is very much in the focus of everything, as a half black woman?
Yeah, I think like what you're talking about specifically in how you experience being brown-haired white girl. This is about the commercial world and how there are specific looks that end up being more important maybe than or as important as the dance level. So what you look like just on a really like a global level, or like the broadest level of the commercial dance world, is that what you look like is extremely important, as well as how well you dance. And so that's where we've both identified. So let's say with contemporary dance, which is what I started out in, I would say there's less emphasis put on what you look like. Less, but not completely not disregarded. And in the commercial world is a lot more. And with contemporary dance, I found actually when I first started, I was at a performing arts high school and I started doing acting. And I was training in that and I loved doing that. And I did lots of like TV commercials on the side. And then I started to stray towards dance more, because I felt like there was more freedom to be who I was. That was a point where I didn't see any, only white people were represented on TV in Australia and on commercials. So I didn't know if there was a place for me. And I'm not sure if that was a conscious or a subconscious decision to just go away from acting, or whether, there were other things at play there. But I moved into dance, which was more like hip hop and jazz. And there you see people, black people represented all the time. So I continued that way. And then I went into contemporary dance, which I also felt was another free world for me to exist in and to keep growing in. And it took me a while to fit in professionally, I have to say, to feel like there was a place for me professionally as a contemporary dancer in Sydney, in Australia. That as far as my training was concerned, I felt really embraced. But then once I got out into the world, I realized quickly that because of the way I look, it's so different that I'm going to have to be the best, or you just don't get a look in, you know. Lots of structures, systems, contemporary dance companies, they have their look and their style. And there's no one really in the industry there that I look like or fit like in terms of my body and the way I look. So it was harder. But then I started working for choreographers that really embraced that difference. So they were looking for dancers that particularly looked unique for them and not necessarily fitting a mold. And then coming to Germany and still very much in the contemporary world and having a similar experience. But then in the commercial world, it was really obvious how much what you look like determines if you're getting the job or not. Yeah. Did I answer your question? Is it there's something more in that?
I just remember you told me that once you started your dance program education, going to dance school, you were the only Black person in the group.
Yeah.
And everybody loved it, and you felt so good about it because everybody really gave you a really good feeling about it.
Yeah, in my high school, like I was not necessarily in the dance training, but just at the high school, it was a performing arts high school. So already you're celebrated for your uniqueness and your talent and what you have to express. And so in that context, I felt really really celebrated for my difference. Like I felt really like, I'm the only Black girl here, but like that seems to be something that makes me more popular and not necessarily something that I should be trying to hide. Yeah.
So in some way, it was always a very positive aspect also in your life.
Yeah. I have to say that the way that I look has created a lot of opportunities for me, and then it's really important to say that, especially at a time like this, because you know Black people are really hurting and they've been carrying this weight for so long, but there has been change. It's just incremental and it's very, very slow. And so from my perspective, I can say, hey, I've been one of the ones that has really benefited from that slow incremental change, where there has been a push now to see people of color represented in TV commercials or on stage and performing. I've been one of the lucky ones that has benefited from that incremental change, but there's a lot more to come, a lot more to do. But I've got a lot to be grateful for in terms of the opportunities that have been given to me. But also in saying that, it's come with really hard work. You know, it's if I'm booked, it's because there's only one spot for a Black dancer, so you've got to be the best Black dancer. You know, just to frame it in the right context.
Yeah, because there could be the argument of white people saying, well, then it's like a good thing for you, right? So why do you even complain or something like that? I heard people say that oh, you have an advantage because you look different, but what you're saying is there was only one spot, so what's the ratio?
Yes.
Yeah. Or just that I have to that's part of the decision making process, you know, that that the way I look will always be part of that decision making process. And when it comes to commercial dance, it will always be, because there will always be these certain like stereotypes, let's say, that need to be represented in that field. But you know, on a job where there's 5 girls that get that need to be casted. You've got the redhead, the blonde, the brunette, the Asian, and the black girl. So you still got 3 white people out of 5 who have been employed. It's kind of looking at it like that. So yes, incremental change means we are being represented, but it's always in relation to whiteness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Talking about advantages, do you feel different about about daily racism in different countries? Because I mean, we all know you've now lived in Australia, in Germany, probably been to other places in the world in your life. Did you see any differences for you in different areas in the world?
Yeah, like was I treated differently?
Yeah, were you treated differently?
Yeah, I remember when we were kids. Oh no, I think at like 14, my high school took us on a trip to China, and my best friend at the time was blonde and blue eyes, and we were walking around, and he just got so much attention because he was this like just unbelievably fascinating for people there. And then for me, it was really just like, move out of the way, please. Yeah, I mean, if he wasn't there, I don't know how I would understand that situation. Whether it had anything to do with me and more to do with the fact that he was so blonde and blue-eyed. When I travel a lot, I think for my job, I travel a lot. Most of the time I'm going from city to city or country to country, and I'm traveling on planes. And I've always noticed there's not a lot of people of color that travel. You know, it's and why is that? Like, is travel like something that comes with a certain level? It's inside a certain hierarchy of careers that Black people aren't often in? Like, what is that? Yeah. I've always questioned. I don't know if any of us are like got the statistics on that.
We don't. We can just make assumptions.
Yeah. So we wanted to clarify 2 terms that have come up like so much these days. Number 1, white privilege, right? I knew that term before, but I feel like also because I live in New Orleans and this issue or this topic has been so present here since I moved here, I felt like, okay, I had a jump start already on knowing what that means. And maybe I'll just share what I think it means or what it means to me. Yeah. Okay, cool. So white privilege basically means that white people, because the way society was built up in a lot of places, that white folks have an easier life just because everything was built on white governments, and white people were looked at more superior to other races, and everything is really it's planned out for the white people, but it's so ingrained in everyone that a lot of people don't even realize that they have this privilege. It's just like the hair thing is such a good example. Like straight hair, or this very straight hair and thin hair is a way to, a lot of people say, oh, that's clean, that's professional, that's the way your hair should look like when you go to work. And then African hair, which can be, it sometimes can be really big hair, is just that's their body, right? That's just a different kind of hair, but that has been in America a lot, has been seen as dirty or not professional, and you should take care of your hair because you should look white, basically. And that hasn't been seen for a very long time because that's just based on white privilege, that everything is supposed to be white. And a lot about America because that's what I know about most. But when the white Europeans came over to America, right, they took the land and then they claimed it to be their own. And then they brought other races and just said, well, you come into our land, which is like, it just makes me so mad even when I like talk about it. But I hope I explained it kind of right. Is that a good way to explain it?
Yeah, I think the overarching thing about white privilege for me is looking at what you don't have to do, and what you don't have to be, and what you that you are not based on your white privilege, because you didn't have to do anything else but be who you are. So that, you know, in society, Black people have to work twice as hard to get the same gains that a white person does. And we have to look on point. We have to be the best at what we do just to get the same. Where, you know, in this recent situation where George Floyd has been murdered by a policeman, and a policeman should represent someone who is there to serve and protect you. But that is not a service given to Black people. That's not a given for Black people, but it is for white people. So it's looking at all the things that as a white person you have as a given just by being white, just by being born. You have like almost this rite of passage to that people of color don't necessarily have. And it takes, because we are born into it, because we're born into a world that is pre-existing and that is already set up. There's so many things that get layered on subconsciously that we're not aware of. So becoming aware of white privilege is educating ourselves on how our lives or the lives of white people are set up to be successful, and how others don't have the same privilege. The example that I want to give is actually easier to explain in terms of the American experience, where hundreds of years you can see white people have the ability to build generation by generation on their name and their family legacy, inheriting money, inheriting land, inheriting business. But then you look at the Black American experience, it means that they've been brought to that country as enslaved people, and then after that managed to break free of that and become citizens. But from that point of zero, of just being considered a citizen, then they have to build. And so already in terms of the white experience in America and the Black experience, you can see that just by being born white now, you're being born into white privilege based on the generations upon generations before you. So that's just one small example. But it really, for me, helps to highlight what it means to exist in a paradigm of white privilege. It's something it's a world that we are born into, and therefore it's a lot of unlearning and a lot of awakening that we need to do in order to understand the structures and how it works.
Yeah, makes it gives, what you just explained gives me really the root cause, right? Why this is all happening. So it definitely clarifies, and you are so much better in explaining this. I can already, like, for me it's like still hard to bring the words into it, because I never had to get into this, right? We as white people, we never had to really educate ourselves. Now I feel the need to, but yeah.
But it's great. I think that these starting points are what is special about this time. It's the starting that's the most important in the conversations we're having today. So, and also English is my first language. I think it's not yours or yours. So like, okay.
I love that too. The listeners can finally listen to a real English person. Yeah. Should we try to pin down the word systematic racism before we keep going? Okay, so I'll try explain that, and Sophia, let me know if it's good. Okay, wrote down some stuff, which actually you sent me. And as far as I understand, systematic racism is something like that that you can explain by situations, like if women are in labor, usually 4 times more women are dying in labor who are Black than white women, because apparently for some reason they get less helped, maybe. And yeah, also like you said, when you are Black and you graduated from school, it's so much harder to find a job after school, after uni, as a Black person. And this is also explaining that there are systems out there that are definitely racist in some way. Like you also already explained, a lot more POC people don't have just as much wealth as white people. So in our system, it's not really easy from the get-go to start building wealth as a Black person, because you didn't have as much years to do so. Yeah, I'm just looking at my notes, to be honest. Yeah, and we all know, especially in the States, that there are way more people who are Black in prison than white people, which cannot be because they are more dangerous and have done more deeds. There has to be something going on with the system.
Yeah.
So those situations can maybe explain what systematic racism could be.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I can't hold my hand up and say like I'm the walking dictionary and definition of all these words, but my understanding of systemic racism is that you know, we so often address racism on a person-to-person basis. That person said something racist to me, or I said something racist to that person. But when we're talking about systemic racism, it is a force that is bigger than the individual, that is been set up so that it operates without necessarily people being aware on a personal level that they are doing something racist or they're acting in a racist way. So, for example, yeah, like the police system is set up in a way that really targets, again, I'm going to try and speak from an Australian perspective. So the police system in Australia, for example, really treats people of colour, especially Indigenous people, incredibly unfair. And we also have history of slavery with Indigenous people. And in coming across a bit of the research that I've done, that this mentality that stems all the way back from slavery feeds into the systems of control inside the police frame, you know, that, how do I explain it? That Black people are seen as troublesome, that are seen as delinquents, that are seen in certain ways, make them more targets for police out on the streets. And yeah, I mean, that's systemic racism in terms of the police, but then you can look at systemic racism in terms of education, you can look at it in terms of government, you can look at it in terms of hospitals where people are treated differently in terms of the healthcare that they have available to them. And yeah, I think the important thing about systemic racism is it takes the individuals inside it to make the change, to awaken, and then to say, hey, we are inside a system and we have the power to change it, because it's been set up well and truly beforehand, and it's very ingrained in the systems.
Also, isn't it that since the education and the health system and stuff like that is not placed as easily available to Black people in maybe all around the world, that makes Black people go more into the into dynamics of doing bad stuff. Well, my English is amazing. And being the bad person and doing illegal stuff to just survive, and being more cruel, more brutal, or I don't know, maybe more angry and behaving that way, so that the police is having them in, like, taking more notice of that in when they do that than when whites do it.
Yeah.
So they sometimes don't have a chance. They have to go underground to make a living, or to just get something done in their life, because they just don't get the chance to be part of the system as much.
Yeah, I think that we can look into this more as we talk about personal experiences, but when you're a person of color growing up in the world, you are, any person growing up in the world is largely influenced by the world that they grow up in. So when we look at these systems that say, hey, young Black boys are delinquents, then you start to some degree take on that perspective and take on that as a part of your identity. And because we're talking about growing up at a very young age where you don't have that self-reflection to say, actually, hang on, that's not me. And so, for example, I, like my brother growing up, I feel like he was really targeted, and he definitely suffered at the hands of direct racism and of systemic racism. And I see how him struggling against that has really formed who he is in the world. And I think that like that kind of racism can really it can just affect you at a young age before you even know who you really are. Yeah,
it can form your personality and also how you react. Like, probably you're going to be more defensive and more like really thinking about these things if as a young Black man, if you encounter so many situations where you are targeted, then you're also gonna act in a certain way. Like, either you're gonna hide or you're gonna want to fight because you realize that it's not fair. So you can again fit in that persona that other people want you to fit in.
Yeah.
I had also one thing to add, that I watched also, like, videos and all of that stuff, and there was a conversation about one woman saying that it's education is not only that it's not available, but what you learn is white history. There are only white people in textbooks. You don't even realize that there are like Black people, that they exist, that there's history that exists. And we have here in America 1 month a year we learn, or the kids learn, about Black history, and that's like the Proud Black Month. It's just 1 month. And the 11 months of the other 11 months of the year, they learn about white history. And it's like, it's just not fair, and it doesn't make sense. So I just wanted to add that also has a big impact on how Black people are seen, because basically they are again segregated from white people as like they are different people and they don't belong to us in a way, because they're not included.
Yeah. And I think the notion of role models is so profound to me. As I grow up, I really, and reflect on my life, I realize how the decisions that I've made and the path that I've taken has been determined by some role model that I've seen in the world, some closer to me, some on TV and movies. So you start to see what's possible for you in the world when you identify with people who are ahead of you in the path that you want to take. And I think that so often people of color are portrayed as delinquents, as uneducated, as angry, as not intelligent. There's so many things that are negative. And so in a systemic level, this is how it starts to perpetrate. And people coming into the world, people of color coming into the world, don't have as many positive examples and positive role models to lead them through out of this like bubble of oppression and systemic racism. Yeah.
I honestly appreciate your insight so much. Also, that you're so open to talk about all of these things from your own perspective, and with having that realization that most of us are like in the beginning of that realization of this learning process, and for having that conversation. We all come from so different worlds and different perspectives of reality, really, that it's as we said in the beginning, it's the best to just talk it through and just understand each other. So I definitely learned a lot from this conversation. I hope the listeners, you learned a lot too. And
no, thank you for having me. I think it's been nice to have a platform to really talk about this stuff, and also have it in a conversational way so that we can have those questions come up and just take them with ease. And people who watch this, I hope that these conversations then can continue in your communities, in your private spaces with your friends, and that it's important to not let the fear of getting something wrong stop us from talking. And also wanted to say that, it's a really sensitive time for Black people right now, and they're hurting, they're angry, and they're feeling like maybe they don't have the energy to talk in the way that maybe I've spoken with you guys today. And so rightly so.
Yes, totally agree.
That they've been through a lot, that we've been through a lot, and just to start with what's closest to you. Start with the people that are close to you, and where you feel that you can hold space for each other in these conversations, and then let that openness affect the way that you see the world in a greater place.
Yes,
because I've had some really beautiful conversations with friends who I grew up with lately about their awakening to white privilege, their awakening to systemic racism, and them coming to me and saying, wow, now I've got questions for you, because growing up alongside you, you were just little Sophie, you were just little Sophia. But now I want to know, I want to understand, and in some cases, some people want to apologize. So if I could say anything, it's just thanks for opening that up. And I hope that these conversations can continue on a personal basis, because that's where the change happens.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also really, really hope that I will be more open for conversations. I will not be offended when a Black person will say, Alex, that was racist, what you just said, but really learn to say, oh, I'm very sorry, I'm not educated in that way, I didn't know, I will never say that again, I'm very sorry, and not say, but I didn't know it. Well, how should I know it that you feel like that? Oh my God, I'm not a racist. I'm not a bad person. I didn't mean it in a bad way. Why do you make me feel bad now? Like, I know that white people can react like that, and I have. And I really just, want to say that I'm very glad that Black people still want to help me become educated. Even though, like you said, it's hard to talk about it over and over again, especially now that after hundreds of years, we just maybe started to really want to know more and want to start a conversation like this. And I'm very happy about every person who's close to me and likes to talk about it, so I can learn more. Besides me reading books, checking out podcasts, and nice posts on social media. And I will just also feel vulnerable and a little bit weird and a little bit of shame until maybe forever, maybe also until I know more and know where I'm at in this topic. Anyways, but it's not about me. It's also very important and something I learned, and I'm very, very glad that we shared this time together. It was a pleasure talking to Sophia about this very vulnerable topic and spending time with you guys here. If you want to know more about Sophia or about racism and systematic racism, you can look up our show notes. We will put a lot of info in there, and you can also find Sophia's Instagram account in it. I'm looking forward to hearing and seeing you. I'm looking forward to hearing from you, and see you next time for the next episode. Bye.